Here we go. 3, 2, 1.
Boom, and welcome to the Big Honker Podcast, brought to you by Bangtail Whiskey. I'm Jeff Stanfield with the world-famous Andy Shaver.
That is I.
With us today from Denver, Colorado, Chris Dorsey, that hosts the Sporting Classic TV channel on the Outdoor Channel. Chris, how are you doing, sir?
I am doing great. How about you guys?
We're doing really, really, really good. Andy's running through this head cut off right now, trying to get all the cameras and everything going. How is now?
Like my camera didn't. I don't know. It glitched out. I don't know. But we're up and running now. Technology, man.
You have a new film out called Wings Over Water that's at IMAX theaters, correct?
Yeah. We just had a big premiere here in Denver, as a matter of fact. About 500 people at it, and it's shot in 3D as well. So it's a pretty cool film. Your guys would love it because it's all about the prairie wetlands, really.
How long did this? I've only seen the trailer. This looked like it had to have taken years. I mean, the camera angles and the technology. What was the time frame on producing this masterpiece? It's beautiful.
Yeah, it was over 2 years, and we had Academy Award nominated producers and filmmakers, really the best guys in the bird world working on it. So it's pretty extraordinary when you see it. And again, it's beyond just the prairie wetlands. It's also up and down the migratory corridors. And in the case, it's really 3 species that we sort of follow: the mallard duck, we follow the sandhill crane, and a yellow warbler. And again, it's that story of the prairie wetlands being this amazing ecosystem that produces some 70% of the water birds in North America. And most folks have heard of the Amazon, they've heard of the Serengeti, they've heard of the Everglades, but unless you're a duck hunter, you probably haven't heard of the Prairie Pothole region of the prairie wetlands. And so the idea was, let's do a film, produce a film that showcases this amazing ecosystem and just how important it is. And we're down, I think it's about 3 billion birds over the last 50 years or so, and that's largely because of what we've lost in the prairie wetland ecosystem. So that's the genesis of the film, and why we produced it, and we're pretty delighted with the results. And Ducks Unlimited and Audubon and the Max Mcgraw Wildlife Foundation came together to really make it happen.
Well, you said we're down 3 billion birds?
Yeah, that's billion with a B over the last 50 years. Cornell, the big research lab out of Cornell University, did that study, and that we're down that many birds in North America alone. So it's a pretty dramatic decline, and again, we've got to figure out how to tell our story about how important that ecosystem is. Look, as duck hunters, we monitor weather forecasts and weather conditions on the prairies all summer long. I mean, more so than I do my own backyard. But for the average person, they don't. They don't understand, that when the ducks and geese come into their towns or their environments, backyards, whatever, that's where they're coming from. That's the place where the beginning happens. And so, we really, like David Attenborough always says, nobody protects what they don't care about.
Right.
And at the end of the day, until we let people know you got a real reason, real vested interest here in that ecosystem, they're not going to care about it and protect it. And that's what we're trying to do here.
The thing that impressed me was with the cinematography is absolutely amazing. Was the mallard hen when she jumps up in the air to catch the bee. The footage from the side. Yeah. Did y'all just happen to have a drone or something above her when that happened, or what?
There's a lot of magic to the IMAX format, and when you've got that kind of time and nice budgets to be able to do pretty amazing things, and that's really the story of IMAX, and that's one of the reasons we chose that IMAX format. Is it's about taking taking the ordinary in many cases and making it extraordinary. And yet, because of that ecosystem, because of the characters of the birds and the animals and the landscape itself, we really started with extraordinary, and then had the ability to make it incredible when it came to the filming. So setting up individual shots, I mean, getting underwater, tracking a crane as it's poking its head underwater to eat, and flying alongside of ducks and geese and cranes, and some of that is, we had a whole training team that imprinted birds that would fly alongside ultralights and drones. And so we could get these amazing sequences of flying right next to a Canada goose as it's going along, and you're the next bird in the line, basically, from that camera point of view. So all that kind of stuff was about making something really memorable, extraordinary, and then you put it on an 80 by 60 foot screen, and by God, you stamp your passport to Canada when you go into that theater. I mean, you have stepped onto the prairie wetlands, and that was the whole idea. It's just to immerse people into this ecosystem for most who would never go there, and celebrate that in a way that only the IMAX format could.
It's truly, I mean, it's beautiful. It's beautifully shot. What's the reception been like? Have people loved it so much? I mean, obviously it's geared more towards waterfowl hunters and waterfowlers, but for just the average person that loves to watch nature in its purest form, has it been a success?
Yeah, I mean, it's really devoted to people that just have interest in birds and just a love of the outdoors and the natural world. Waterfowlers are organically drawn to it, obviously, because of the location of the prairie wetlands and just how important that is to our lifestyle. But it's really for people living in New York and Chicago and Los Angeles and policymakers in Washington as they contemplate, new legislation that might protect these ecosystems. All that, the whole idea is sort of like Ansel Adams. Remember the old photographer who took these amazing landscape images of El Capitan and the American West. And once those still images came to Washington, guys like Teddy Roosevelt, et cetera, said, we gotta protect these places. And so it's that visual of just how amazing that ecosystem is and how special it is. That is what's resonating to these audiences. It's open now in New York, Chicago, St. Louis, Galveston, Corpus Christi, Hastings, Nebraska, Edmonton, and it's going to Chattanooga, and it'll go to 50, 60 different theaters here in the next few months. And the thing about the IMAX films, it's not like a Hollywood release where it opens on Friday, plays for 2 weeks, and they cycle in a new film. These theaters carry that film for a year. So it's staying in market for a long time. It's sort of like, we always equate it to like the circus coming to town. And when that film comes to town, we do a ton of interviews. I've been doing interview after interview for the last 2 weeks with TV stations, radio stations, newspapers, et cetera, talking about why the film and what it took to make it. How did you get Michael Keaton? Huey Lewis is in the film as well with his Power of Love song. And those guys are both bird hunters, by the way. Most people don't know that, but they are. And they're friends of ours. We've known them for a long time, done a lot of work with them over the years. And so all that is part of the magic of the film opening. And it gives us a chance then to talk about, even if we don't have hunting in the film, we're talking about what waterfowlers do for conservation, right? I mean, you can thank the waterfowlers for the National Wildlife Refuge System, in addition to the billions of dollars that they pump into Ducks Unlimited, Delta, and other organizations, private lands conservation. I mean, those are the guys that are footing the bill. So while the film doesn't necessarily say that, it creates the opportunity to have that conversation about just how important hunters are, particularly waterfowlers, to duck and goose conservation.
You got Batman to narrate your movie. That's crazy.
Yeah, it's funny. That's exactly what a guy on a local news station the other day said. He said, he's my favorite Batman. I said, yeah, who better than Birdman to narrate a bird film, right?
Yeah.
So, and Keaton's a great guy. He's got a great conservation DNA. Huey Lewis the same way. Huey lives up in Montana. We did a series called Buccaneers and Bones for about a decade with those guys, and Liam Neeson and Tom Brokaw, and quite a cast of characters, but they all love the outdoors. They're all sportsmen, and they love giving back. You know, they're conservationists at their core.
So this took 2 years to do. I'm assuming COVID messed with it in all sorts of ways. What were the hurdles that you had to jump through with the pandemic and shutting everything down to get this up and running?
Well, it's a great question, and so much other production was shut down. But kind of the good news about this kind of film is that it's a small crew, and they're moving in very remote areas. So instead of flying to various locations, they hopped in vans and started driving over the continent. So that was really the biggest kind of disrupting element of what happened because of COVID. But you know, otherwise it's chasing the seasons, right? I mean, these are wild birds, and you're spending a hell of a lot of time in marshes and building, you know, small blinds basically that float, and you could move around a marsh, and habituating cameras to nesting birds. And I mean, there's a sequence in this film that, you know, when you go to see it, it's just absolutely unbelievable. And it's a great horned owl that's on the prairies. And part of the story of the prairies are, you know, you got predators that are pioneering onto the prairies that didn't used to be there over, you know, 30, 40 years ago. You didn't have a lot of those predators, and great horned owls are one of them. But there's a sequence where we've got a mallard hen nesting, and they've, over a period of time, gotten a camera right next to the nest itself. And the camera blind, you know, where we've got a monitor and the camera setup, the recording is happening 300 yards away. So we're looking at the nest through a monitor. We've got a great horned owl that's like 100 yards away, sees the mallard, comes straight at the camera. So on an 80 by 60 foot screen, you see this basically a 70-foot wide great horned owl coming straight at the camera, coming straight at the mallard hen. And I won't give it away what happens, but it was a pretty extraordinary sequence.
I saw that on one of the trailers, and it looks. So how do you get your camera in a position to where it's right next to the nest? Is it an inch at a time? Is it you just work your way up to it, or is it pitch dark when you do it? What's the technique?
Well, until the hen sets to start incubating the eggs, she'll go off a period of time every day to feed and water, and then come back. So as she does that, you take the camera and you move it a little bit closer and closer and closer, and it's a dance. I mean, you can't just put a camera right on top of the nest or the hen doesn't come back, right? So it's this gradually move it in closer and closer and closer, because these guys have done bird films all over the world. You know, they know the game. They just kind of know what they can get away with and what they can't. And they don't always guess right either. Sometimes, you know, it just didn't work. But when it does, it's magic.
Did anybody get their ass kicked by a sandhill crane? Because they're vicious. They're vicious, heartless bastards, and I hate hunting them. They're cruel.
No cameramen were harmed in the filming of this this documentary. No, it's but they are, and of course they're dinosaurs, right? I mean, they're throwbacks to the Jurassic, really, and an amazing bird, and part of this thing was filmed in Nebraska, as you might imagine, right? The greatest concentration of sandhill cranes in the world, and just the sound of that. I mean, in addition to the epic nature of so many cool sandhill cranes doing their dance and all that, it's just that audio. And when you've got surround sound in an IMAX theater, you really do feel like you're sitting on the Platte River of Nebraska. It's just that powerful.
What did when you do the underwater filming, like with the ducks, and you can see their legs when they're swimming and stuff, how do you do that? Is that a robotic camera? Is there somebody actually in a wetsuit in the water with them?
Both, yeah. And we actually had holes drilled in the ice. You see those salamanders underwater, and of course they look like dinosaurs because they're on that giant screen. But literally going in wetsuits in the dead of winter, drilling through the ice itself, getting underwater to, again, tell the story of the potholes, right? I mean, it's such an amazing, unique ecosystem, and most people don't know. I mean, you would if you're a duck hunter, that they're really a gift from the glaciers, right? The glaciers came down, scraped and carved hundreds of thousands, if not millions, of these little shallow wetlands and potholes and lakes and marshes. And so we really wanted to tell the story of what each individual pothole is like. I mean, it's its own little ecosystem and its own little waterfowl soup kitchen. And the story and the reason for doing that was to just make people understand, you know, every time you drain one of these things, every time you remove it from the landscape, you have taken something highly unique that's evolved basically as its own little ecosystem, and they're very, very difficult to bring back. You can bring them back in some form, but the microbes and life that's part of that pothole is something that's evolved on its own over a long period of time. So you can't just replicate something you take away, and you know, so that's part of the whole message of let's prevent the loss of these things rather than try and bring them back after the fact.
Yeah, I mean, anybody that thinks that they can duplicate God's work is, you know, they're in for a rude awakening. I mean, these things have taken time, and nature is in perfect balance. And when we start taking things away or adding to them, we're not going to see the same results. We're going to see something far, far from what we ever thought that we might.
When you had the video of the warbler flying away from you and you had the camera behind it, it's just amazing. It just blows my mind. How big were those drones that you were using?
You know, a lot of different size. There were some that were large, carrying much bigger cameras, some very, very small ones flying through the Central American forest as the warbler went down there. But yeah, I mean, to your point, I mean, it really is it just got darker in here all of a sudden.
Uh-oh.
It really is an important, you know, story to tell, you know, that it's cheaper, much more cost effective to save these wetlands than it is to reboot them. If you try and restore them, it's just so much more expensive than just keep them on the ground in the first place. Don't destroy them, don't lose them. That's the key.
It's you know, that now they're in the middle of a drought, so that's scary in itself, because like you said, 70% of the ducks come from that Prairie Pothole region.
Well, that's right. And what happens then is as you have a drought, it's sort of a license to some farmers to go ahead and plow through them, drain them, and once they're converted, you know, typically they're not coming back, and that is a big problem. So that's something we're all basically wrestling with at this point.
I was stalking your Instagram after this, and I'm jealous of you. You shot an oscillated turkey. When did you did that? What, a couple years ago? You finished your World Slam?
Just a couple of years ago. Yeah, it was, and it's a funny story because I spent, you know, gosh, I went down there almost 20 years ago, and we got weathered out. We had a fire come through and basically just push us out of the entire forest itself. So anyway, I'm trying to get this camera set here a little bit.
You're good.
Let's try this. We're okay.
Yeah, you're good. What was that? What was it like shooting the oscillated turkey? Because I've heard they're a fickle little animal.
You know, it's interesting because you're using a male call to call a male bird. You're not using a hen call. Mm-hmm. So you go down there, and it's you want to be in that window of time though, because the season's pretty long actually, and it's like 2 or 3 weeks when they're really, really receptive to the call, and that's when you want to go. But it's an electronic call that they're using, and it's not really a gobble. It's kind of a gobble, but it's kind of not. It's just a kind of a liquidy, almost a gobble sound.
Yeah.
And it's thick forest, and it's not a tall rainforest or anything like that. It's a short forest, which means the ground vegetation is very thick because light actually gets to the forest floor. So you got to be ready for a lot of thickness. And trying to get a shot is tricky, and you can hear them. You know they're coming, but trying to see them coming through the forest is a bit of a trick.
And you wouldn't think that whenever you look at it, because it's just all these bright colors, and you figure it would stick out, you know, wherever it goes. But no, it's hard to see coming through.
Yeah, it's just so thick. I mean, that's the reality is it's a very thick, lush environment, and but it's a super interesting hunt, and it's a stunning bird. I mean, it's one of those birds that, you know, once you see one up close, it really is something between a peacock and a turkey. It's fun.
I wonder if their gobble is different because there's so many predators that could eat it potentially, because it doesn't seem like it's as loud as a Rio or an Eastern, is it?
It's not. And, I almost wonder, and again, like any jungle fowl, they're very brightly colored because the idea is for the hens to be able to see them, and birds in dark forest environments tend to evolve with very, very bright colors. And that's what I do with a biology degree, is I win bar bets like this. But it's, so yeah, whether or not it's, the sound is something maybe the hens can pick up better, I don't know.
Maybe like a lower frequency travels better. I don't know.
Could be. And that's what I would wonder about. It is a different kind of a sound.
Yeah. So when did this idea for this film come to you? You said it's taken 2 years to make. Has this been something that's been an idea in the back of your head for decades, and you finally put pen to paper on how to pull it off, or when did this idea first come to you?
Yeah, it's a great question. I mean, the genesis of this whole thing was the Max Mcgraw Wildlife Foundation. If you don't know these guys, you should. They're out of Chicago, and they've been around for a long, long time. They're really kind of a conservation think tank. So they convened essentially the best minds in waterfowl conservation, U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, Ducks Unlimited, major philanthropists in the waterfowl world, the Canadian Wildlife Service, Ducks Unlimited Canada, and brought everybody in basically to say, look, let's talk about the North American Wetlands Conservation Act. Let's talk about, what's working, what's not working. And what we came to realize is that nobody knows the story. Nobody understands what the hell we're doing. So once again, we're doing conservation in a vacuum and without, significant public support. And so everybody sort of determined that we really got to tell our story. We got to tell the story of this ecosystem. Why are we busting our ass over so many years, spending billions of dollars to save that ecosystem? And we're fighting along the way to get that message out. So let's create a strategy that's broader and deeper and goes to the mainstream, right? Duck hunters get it. They understand it. They know full well what's going on. So we're really good at talking to ourselves about conservation, the need for conservation of the prairie wetlands. But when it comes to mainstreaming that story and getting buy-in from the general public, from politicians that are answering to the general public when it comes to appropriations and funding, we're not so good at that. So that was where this all came from. And I was brought in as a media strategy guy, having produced 120 different television series on 25 networks over 20 years. And once upon a time, in full disclosure, I ran marketing communications for DU. Mm-hmm. So I knew the story pretty well. So that was really where we landed on, let's create something that's meaningful, long-term, and talks to somebody other than just ourselves, right? What a novel idea. Right. And that's where this came from.
Yeah. Has there been, are any politicians starting to see, kind of the importance of keeping this area pristine and unchanged? Have that moved the needle any in DC maybe?
Well, and again, we're about to do our screening in DC, so it'll be a lot of fun to get Fish and Wildlife Service folks there, House and Senate Natural Resource Committee members there, maybe somebody from the administration, we'll see, but get the key decision makers, policy makers, and state agency types, et cetera, in there, and really celebrate that ecosystem in a way that, again, most of those folks are getting reports, they're seeing still photographs, but they're not really understanding just how important that ecosystem is. And really beyond just birds. I mean, it's really the area that are the lungs and the kidneys of our continent. And it's purifying our groundwater aquifers, recharging them, and it's sequestering carbon, taking pollutants out of the air, giving us oxygen in return, which is a pretty dang good deal. And so it's not just birds. Birds are the keystone species. When you don't see the birds coming down, you don't see as many, you can understand something's going on up there. So, the canary in the coal mine situation where, we have to pay attention to what the birds are telling us and take care of that environment.
What were you going to say, Jeff?
Do you see a big change when we have changes in government? You know, we go from one administration, Republican. Do you see a lot of changes that way when it comes to the actual people that are trying to help the, you know, with the wildlife? I'm trying to think of the word. The Department of the Interior, I guess, is who's in charge of all that. Is there not much change happening then, or is there a huge change from one administration to the next on the funding?
You know, it kind of depends typically on the demands, and I'm on the board of the Congressional Sportsmen's Foundation as well, and have been for about 4 years. So we see a lot of that. I think the good news is there seems to be agreement that conservation, hunting as a method of conservation and a funding mechanism for conservation is pretty well accepted by both sides of the aisle. So we kind of get past some of the bipartisan or the partisan bickering that happens so much in Washington. So I think that's the good news, is that, you know, there is enough great conservation data, information out there, enough people buy into the fact that there's a lot of funding that comes from Pittman Robertson funds, Dingell Johnson funds, private sector conservation organizations, et cetera, that really are the funding backbone of conservation in America, that both sides of the aisle do buy in. So I think we as sportsmen have done a pretty good job of talking to the politicos, especially, and letting them understand just how important our role is, particularly on the funding side of things. And so that's worked pretty well. I think that's a bit of an insurance policy that no matter who's in power, you know, at least we can agree on certain elements of our culture, our society, and our conservation ethic, and move forward.
Well, you know, we've talked about this a lot on the podcast, but if it wasn't for waterfowl, there's no telling, because of the conservation efforts that waterfowlers and just hunters in general, I don't care if you're deer hunting, whatever, if you're putting resources back into the land, you're not only helping the population that you're targeting while you hunt, but you're helping all of these other species. And, you know, the food that you might put out for a deer can help your turkey population. And, you know, we put a lot into it, but we're also helping not just ducks and geese, but we're helping every little thing that's out there that eats.
Well, you're exactly right, and that's the message we've got to take to the mainstream, right? I mean, that's what's lost on the general population, that, you know, some may be anti-hunting or agnostic towards it, whatever. But at the end of the day, just look at the National Wildlife Refuge System, right? There's 300 to 400 species of birds and mammals, et cetera, that live on those national wildlife refuges. Only a small percentage are huntable species. The rest are in many cases endangered or threatened. So hunters' dollars, once again, are paying for that habitat. And think about the guys, you know, people you've had on your show, that put a lot of their discretionary dollars into private lands habitat management. Well, do you think it's just the sporting species, the huntable species, that benefit from that? Of course not. It's all sorts of species. And so that's the key message that we've got to take out, that is one of the frustrations I have, that I've been giving speeches to the industry and talking to manufacturers and conservation groups, saying, look, we have got to find a way to mainstream our message and just how important this conservation funding mechanism is to all wildlife, to conservation, to healthy soil and water. And let's let people in Chicago, New York, Los Angeles, Tucumari, I don't care. Everybody needs to understand that role and how important that is. We've got a really good program here in Colorado called Hug a Hunter. Mm-hmm. It's a television and radio campaign which really just does nothing but celebrate the role that hunters play in conservation of all species in Colorado. And if you like the state parks, if you like the county forests, if you like the National Wildlife Refuges, whatever you like in the outdoors in Colorado, chances are hunters have helped pay for that. So next time you see one, give them a hug. Yeah. And that's the general theme, right? And it's a great program, and it's wonderful. It's on all of our television stations. It's on our radio stations. It's in print. And it's something every state should emulate, frankly.
I think that's a really good point. It's like in Texas, the hunters, the licensing fund doesn't go in the general fund, but it goes in Texas Parks and Wildlife. And I'm sure some of my facts are going to be off on this, but it pays for a lot of our state parks. Well, the people that are paying for that isn't the guy in a canoe that's just bird watching or a granola crunch or whatever you want to call them, because those guys don't buy hunting license and fishing license. The people that hunt and fish are paying for that, but everybody gets to enjoy that park, and that's a great thing. And it's the same with the wildlife. If it wasn't for duck stamp dollars in 1937 or 38 or 36, whenever they come around, we wouldn't have all the waterfowl we have now. Hunters are the best conservationists in the entire world, and if you're not a hunter, it's hard to understand how someone that can hunt and kill something is saving more animals than they harvest, but they just don't get it sometimes.
Well, and again, I think the onus is on us to tell that story, right? And whether it's through the educational system or it's writing letters to the editor as somebody has an anti-hunting piece or whatever, we just have to be engaged. And it's fun to go to social media sites where somebody blasts hunting or whatever and just follow up, answer or comment about that lack of information, et cetera, and just stay engaged, man. You'd be amazed at what one well-written letter can do, what one social media post can do in the right circumstance. It's really about just being engaged. I mean, we've got a great story to tell, but we got to tell it to somebody other than ourselves. We can all agree we're good folks. We're doing a lot of great work, but unfortunately, there's other people that just don't understand, don't know it. So it's on us to tell that story. And I spent a good bit of my time, in other television series that we do. We try and infuse that conservation message all the time. We did a series called Kodiak for Discovery, which was about the bear hunting and the bear hunters on Kodiak Island. The story of Kodiak Island has the highest densities of bears in the world, not in spite of hunting, but because of hunting. And so we were able to weave that message into the storyline of the series, and it's in 170 countries of the world, right? So we're doing all that we can do basically to kind of mainstream that message, make sure people do understand, that role hunters do play. And I write a column for Forbes, and I cover this kind of stuff in Forbes. Forbes has 127 million views of their online content every month in I think 34 different languages, something like that. So again, I'm trying to use that platform to talk about hunting, conservation, not just domestically in the United States, but African conservation, conservation all over the world, and try and tell the story of what hunters are doing, go after the animal rights organizations. I just did that in the UK. In Britain, they were trying to end all trophy imports from Africa. And of course, that's a disaster. Even the experts from Oxford said, you want to destroy African wildlife, you stop importing trophies from Africa, and you will succeed in destroying African wildlife because you'll remove any incentive to conserve those species in Africa, and the poachers will move in masse and wipe them out like they always do. And so just being able to write about that, intelligently in a forum where people other than just hunters are going to be reading it is something we've got to pioneer. We've got to pioneer more and more ways to reach the mainstream.
You talk about that in Africa. One rhinoceros, one elephant, one lion, whatever it is over there in Africa, that feeds a whole village. That money that comes in to hunt, those people over there don't want the hunters to stop coming. It's the people that live somewhere else that have no clue what's going on. It's the same way in the world all the time, too. You can take it to any social issue. In south side of Chicago, they have tons of innocent people get shot every day. Well, everybody wants to blame it on guns. It's not the guns, it's the people there. It's people that don't know what's going on. Africa and the hunting is the same exact way. Those people over there need us to harvest those animals. They need hunters to come there. That's what makes their whole economy run.
Well, that's right. And I think Safari Club has done a very good job of shifting the focus to what is it the people on ground in Africa want? Because at the end of the day, if they're not part of the equation, there will be no conservation. There will be no success with wildlife conservation in Africa. And so they very smartly have said, well, why don't we ask the African leaders, what they think of conservation, the jobs, the sustainability of wildlife populations, creating value with hunting of those species. And again, we're talking about very small numbers of these animals that are taken, very controlled, yet significant dollars are spent, employment happens, The meat is then distributed. Nothing goes to waste. And again, that's something that the label of trophy hunting, right? I mean, that's something the average American, the average European especially, just seems to recoil from. Right. I mean, the notion that you're killing an animal, and that's their conception, right? You're killing an animal, cutting its head off, leaving the carcass, and walking away. Mm-hmm. And of course, we all know that's ridiculous, ludicrous. It's against the law. It's illegal, immoral. We don't do that. But by God, that's the narrative that the animal rights groups love to push out there. So we've got to combat that. We've got to get our story out there. But I love the fact that SCI has gone to the leaders of Africa and said, why don't you explain to these folks in the West, from London to New York to wherever, what the reality is on ground. And maybe then we can make an informed argument and decision about what to do about wildlife and wildlife conservation. So, yeah, I mean, it's eternal vigilance. You got to stay engaged. It's never going to go away. We're always going to have this debate. But there's a great group out there too. Your guys might have interest in. It's called humanewatch.org. And you talk about a great expose, series of articles, information, videos on just the corruption of the animal rights movement. I mean, these people are nothing but fundraisers off of emotion. They don't give a damn about wildlife at the end of the day, or pets in the Humane Society of the United States that doesn't run a single shelter and doesn't protect anything. They just take money. They raise money off of emotion. People think it's the shelters in their local community that's the Humane Society of the United States is running those, and they have nothing to do with them, or almost nothing to do with them. And yet they've been trading on that brand confusion for a long, long time. So it's really a corrupt enterprise, and we've got to be aggressive in our defensive hunting, going after our opponents. We've got to be proactive in how we communicate to the mainstream that doesn't have an opinion one way or another. I gave a speech, I don't know, a couple of years ago. It was at a big event in Nashville, and I just said, look, where are our Super Bowl ads? Why aren't we taking out Super Bowl ads about all that hunters and conservationists do for the wildlife of America and the wildlands and et cetera, and just be more proactive? It was a bit of a rhetorical question, but the idea is let's start thinking bigger, broader, more meaningfully than just, could we put a piece in our own House Organ magazine of our membership hunting club, That's
fascinating that the tip top of these animal rights organizations don't give a damn about wildlife. It's just they saw it as an opportunity to make money. Same as Al Gore. If Al Gore gave a shit about the planet, he wouldn't be flying around in a private jet everywhere, or however he gets around. He doesn't give a shit about global warming. He saw it as an opportunity to push an agenda and funnel money to
make money, just like the Haiti stuff. All them billions of dollars raised for Haiti, and Haiti's worse off now than it was before they had the earthquake almost. I mean, it's horrible. The money didn't go to that. It's just so a rich guy could make 10% for the big guy. They all make money off the top. That's what it all does.
Right. But they don't.
Their hypocrisy has no bounds. There's no doubt about it.
And I've never heard it put that way. So I'm speechless. I'm blown away at that realization.
What's in the future here? What do we got next coming out now that we've done this IMAX film?
We've got another IMAX that we're just in development on right now that'll be part of the waterfowl world as well, and a really key ecosystem that's in distress. And other than that, we're doing lots of television shows, always developing new stuff and trying to stay as active as we can in kind of what's going on in the outdoor community, the hunting community, and kind of some interesting different pools of membership kind of evolving out there. I'm curious, just as a lifelong sportsman and conservation guy, to see where sort of the meat eater realm goes versus the Hunter Nation guys versus Safari Club, and is there a nexus there, or are they going to kind of do their own thing and carve out a different space? And I don't know what you guys think about that. I'd be curious to hear what your opinion is of that, but I'm just fascinated as a hunter conservationist to kind of see that whole world evolve a little bit.
You mean meat eater as Ranella and those guys?
Yeah, I mean, they've taken, which I think is pretty smart, focusing on food. Hunting is food, but they're public lands. They're kind of focused on public lands. There's a bit of a different positioning with them than, say, Hunter Nation, SCI, some of those groups. And I'm just kind of curious to see what evolves out of that, and if they come together and for a common good, or if they just kind of continue to do their separate things, or what. It's an interesting evolution in the hunting conservation arena that is relatively new. And so I'm just curious to see how it evolves.
It is interesting because, 10, 15 years ago, the only place that you got a hunting narrative was if you tuned into Outdoor Channel or the Sportsman's Channel. And now, you got like Meat Eater. It's its own. I mean, it's print. They're doing articles. They're doing videos. So like they have become their own network almost. So we are in an interesting place right now as hunters, as conservationists, as waterfowlers. Places are popping up and they are their own channel. They're their own entity. And I don't know what those guys are going to do. Meat Eater and all the other big boys, they're I don't know if they'll ever come together or not. I don't know. Because I think they'd all kind of have to take not ego driven, but it is a little bit ego driven. They'd kind of have
egos there.
They'd have to take a step back and be like, okay, we're going to work with you guys for the common good. Where I don't know, they're making a lot of do-re-mi right now, so it might be hard for them to take a step back.
Yeah, again, maybe it's just a question of can they come together on a few key things and still keep their own brand identity and their own differentiation. That's all fine. I guess from my perspective, is there a way to bring the heavyweights together to kind of have success on key issues and leverage the power, the strength of the collective for a few key wins for all of us? And that would be sort of my question. I'm just trying to see if that can be done.
Yeah,
I think you're leveling into the most important. I shouldn't say the most important. Waterfowl hunters are the biggest group in the United States or in the world when it comes to hunting and putting the funnel in their money and their ideas and their desires together more than anything else. There's probably more deer hunters than duck hunters in the United States, but the duck hunter's passion is different than any other breed. There's not. I can't think of anything out there other than maybe golfers and that really desire everything ducks is what they think about. If they walk in a building and there's a painting of a duck, I don't care where it is, they stop and look at that painting of a duck. And it's not like that with anything else. And so I think y'all are on the right track on the duck hunters.
Well, I think waterfowlers are all in. I mean, it's pretty damn hard to be a half-assed waterfowler these days.
Yes, you're right.
Just getting access and the equipment that it takes, the expense behind it. And you're right, they're an incredibly dedicated audience. And I remember a stat when I was at Ducks Unlimited that there are actually more ice fishermen in America than there are waterfowlers. Yet waterfowlers generate so much more money in conservation and put so much more money into their sport than really any other category.
Oh, you think about it just from your time at Ducks Unlimited. You can go to it. I went to a DU banquet 6 weeks ago, 2 months ago, and I'm going to bet you that the people in the room, only half of them had duck hunted this past year. But they were spending money, and it was, I don't know if it was to impress their buddies. I don't know if it was to impress the little girl in the little short dress that was selling raffle tickets. I don't know what it is. But they buy into it 100%, and it's all about the ducks. And it's crazy. There's nothing else like that in America than in the world other than duck hunting that I can think of.
Yeah, well, God bless them. And you're right. I mean, there is nothing like that the world over. Having kicked around the planet for a long time, and you look at what happens in America with this American model. Some people call it the North American model. I call it the American model of conservation. God bless our Canadian friend, but it was the American model. So it is amazing what happens here. And the private sector, the privatization of conservation in America is so huge compared to the rest of the world. It just doesn't exist. I mean, you've got clubs around the world. You've got somebody managing their private lands in South Africa or whatever, New Zealand. But when it comes to a national, continental footprint of conservation funded significantly by the private sector, it just doesn't exist elsewhere.
How long have you been writing for Forbes?
It's been about 2-3 years now. And I've done a lot of writing over the years for lots of different publications. Once upon a time, I'm a recovering magazine editor, actually. Edited DU magazine before I ran all the media marketing at DU, and then edited Sports Afield magazine, and then created television after that. And that's really when we started the TV business, TV company. And but yeah, it's Wall Street Journal, Newsweek. I've been trying to write for a lot of mainstream publications over the years, and only because I felt like there's a lot of good writers in the outdoor category that have it really well covered. I don't have a lot to add to what they're already doing, but I did feel like, as a biologist, as somebody who had a passion for the outdoors, and just a bit of a different background in media, that it was nice to be able to kind of take the story to the mainstream using those skill sets and abilities in context. And that's what I focused on. I just enjoy it.
Well, and it's a great responsibility that you've undertaken, because a vast majority of their readers and their subscribers are probably not our demographic. So it's a great responsibility on your part to, number one, have the facts, and then be able to articulate the facts to somebody that has never shouldered a shotgun, never seen a sunrise over duck decoys or anything like that, and to not only at least put this on their radar. So it's a great responsibility that you've undertaken, and I'm glad it's you.
Well, I appreciate that, and again, it's, as my wife says, it's my therapy. I mean, it's, if something pisses me off, if I'm irritated about something, that I'm seeing in the mainstream, a misunderstanding of hunting, of conservation, of what's going on and what we're doing as hunters and conservationists, I get to write about it. I can take it straight to an audience of millionaires that are super connected, many of whom you'd be surprised at how many sportsmen actually do read Forbes. Yeah. And, so it's the top of the food chain folks that do have some influence, do have the ability to make decisions that have impact. And so that's what I relish about it is, I just, when I did a piece, had 181,000 views of that article, people who read the article. And it's like, this is so fantastic. I mean, it was just like being able to reach that many people and tell the story that needs to be told that really nobody else is telling, certainly to the mainstream. It's just fun. It's satisfying. It's gratifying. And I feel like I need to do it.
What did they originally reach out for you for?
It was, I had done stuff for the Wall Street Journal, and I used to do a column for the Robb Report years ago when I had more time and when I wasn't running a television company. But I just, I had a little bit more time, and it's like, I'm just going to start reaching out to some of these publications, and it was sort of a cold call. Here's my bio, here's my background. And the Forbes guys came back and said, we don't really have anybody with your background. We'd love to have somebody who could write, maybe not every week, but every couple of weeks if you've got the time. And so we landed on the relationship, and they give me a lot of freedom. I can write about a lot of things, and one week I'll hammer Joe Biden, and the next week I'm talking about quail hunting in Texas. So it's a pretty broad swath of content, which is fun.
So you're the guy to ask this. What is TV, are TV executives freaking out right now at the emergence of streaming and on-demand access to everything? Because I mean, I've cut the cord, quote unquote, but I mean, there's so many options out there that I don't know how TV is going to survive, especially in the traditional sense.
Yeah, I wouldn't think of it as TV. I mean, I think for a little window, there were some folks that were freaking out in the television realm. And then what you have to understand is the people who own the streaming are going streaming also own the TV,
Mm-hmm.
right? So, these are multi-billion-dollar corporations that are going, well, we don't really give a damn. We're going to create content. We're going to distribute content. If it's not on cable TV or broadcast TV, we're going to put it on streaming. And guess what? They're doing both. And the reason they're kind of smiling all the way to the bank right now is people are spending more on content now than they've ever spent on content by a factor of probably 15. So it's really a great time to be a content creator. The bottom line is video is a universal donor of content, and that's going into every platform. So whether it's Discovery or Discovery Plus, we just sold a series to Peacock, which is a streaming platform, of course.
That's what I have.
NBC. Yeah.
Yeah.
And so, that's in the crime space. We do stuff outside of the outdoor space, obviously. So, it's an interesting time for sure. I was on a hunt. This is a interesting anecdotal story with one of the biggest guys in media in the world in Hungary. I'm shooting driven boar in Hungary, and he's a friend of mine. I've known him for a long time, and we hunt together, fish together. And he said he was going to lose. He was going to lose $1 billion a year for each of the next 6 years launching his streaming platform. But he had to do it, and it would turn out just fine at the end of the day. Now, can you imagine losing $1 billion a year, knowing you're going to lose $1 billion a year for that duration, but knowing you have to get into streaming? Well, it helps when you're a $75, $80 billion company as well. But again, at the end of the day, all these streaming platforms are just the new cable TV. Mm-hmm. I mean, that's all it is. I mean, it's only you're spending a hell of a lot more money for it. At first it was, I don't want to pay for all the cable TV. I only watch 6 channels. I don't want to pay for 120. And at the end of the day, having 120 kept it super affordable. And now that you're buying a la carte, you're paying through the nose.
Yeah.
So, it's just kind of funny to me. I mean, it's
people don't see that they're paying, $10 12 different ways, but they got pissed at the $120 cable bill because that was just outrageous.
I mean, to me, it's almost like the biggest scam ever. Mm-hmm. I mean, it's like, oh my God. I mean, you're paying a fortune for content now, which as a producer, okay, sorry, but this is what you asked for. So yeah, the notion that TV's going to die, everybody's cut the cord, and it's all gone away. Well, hell, it's just going into streaming, man. You're going to pay more for it there. At least you had ad-supported content, and you still do have some ad-supported content in streaming, but a lot of it's not ad-supported. And the other thing is you're going to have a lot of brands that create their own channels, right? I mean, look at some of the outdoor brands. Yeti, that's got its own content coming all the time. Sims does a great job with content as well, and they're just going, why do we need to buy somebody else's content? We'll create our own. We got our own pipeline. Let's just do it.
And you said we're in the golden age for a content creator right now. This is best time.
Absolutely. Are you kidding? Yeah, I mean, look at the trillions of dollars that are being spent internationally on content acquisition.
Yeah.
And it's just enormous. And it's getting bigger and bigger, and part of it is, the rest of the world is coming online. The rest of the world is able to buy some of this content as opposed to nothing but soccer games on. If you go to Europe, I mean, oh my God, television in Europe was so god awful for so long, and even worse in America. Africa barely existed. So, the North American footprint, the U.S. footprint of content was so much bigger, so much more developed, and so much more coming out in terms of films and television, that we sort of populated the world best we could. And with content, and Discovery was really the pioneer of doing that. I think they were in 150 countries long before anybody else was out there grabbing spectrum and distribution. And you wonder why Discovery got into soccer in Europe. Well, because it's a big deal in Europe, and they've got massive distribution all over the world where they watch soccer, So yeah, it's a fun time. I mean, it's an interesting time in media all the way around.
Was this film always going to be shot in IMAX and done in IMAX? Like, did you just have that grand, you wanted this to feel grand whenever you walked into the theater?
Well, we felt like we really wanted to celebrate that ecosystem, that environment, in a way that if you are never going to go there, you're going to step into that theater and you're just going to go, this is an amazing place. We have got to preserve that environment. And look, at the end of the day, it plays in IMAX theaters for a decade. And then from there, it's going into television all over the world. It'll be carved up in social platforms and streaming and digital. The content is just too amazing not to live everywhere. So it just reinforces the importance of that ecosystem through the power of that amazing film.
Yeah. I can't wait. You know, when Austin, I think it's in Austin right now. I think that's about as close as it is to us, but it'll migrate. It'll be somewhere a little bit closer, and we'll definitely take the kids to go watch it. But I'm excited for them to, I don't know if they've ever been to an IMAX film, so this might be their first experience there. But I've been to a couple, and it's, when they're done well, you leave the theater thinking, my goodness, how'd they do that?
Well, Joe, let me know what you think. I'd love to hear somebody who's a seasoned waterfowl guy. I'd love to get your feedback.
Did you say they're in Corpus Christi?
I believe it's in Corpus Christi as well, and it jumped into Texas pretty fast. In fact, I think Texas was the first market to carry the film. Period.
I wonder if Lubbock's got it yet. Does they have an IMAX theater?
I didn't see
Lubbock
it yet.
You can go to wingsoverwater.org or .com, one of the two, and it's got all the cities, all the theaters where it's playing, and where it will open as well. So check that out for sure.
We sure appreciate it very much. You've been a very interesting guest. Very interesting guest.
We appreciate you coming on here. We wish you the best of success with this endeavor. And if there's anything that we can ever do for you in the future, don't hesitate to give us a holler. And I'm ready to go see Wings Over Water.
Terrific. Well, thanks for having me on, guys. It's been a lot of fun. Great questions.
Hey, thank you, and God bless you, and have a great, great, great day, sir.
All right. Cheers.
Thank
you too.
Wings Over Water.
Very interesting man.
In IMAX theaters only.
Right now it's in St. Louis, Denver, Austin, Texas, New York City, and Orlando, Florida is what it's showing on the deal. Coming soon to Pittsburgh, Birmingham, Hastings, Nebraska, Edmonton, Alberta, New York City again, Fort Lauderdale, Omaha, Taiwan, Chattanooga, Tennessee, Hutchinson, Kansas, San Jose, Boston, and Peoria. I'm surprised Hutchinson, Kansas has a IMAX theater.
Why, Jeff?
Not a very big town. Just kind of surprising. How many people you think live in Hutchinson, smartass? And just say I have no clue, and we'll just end it right there.
No.
Okay.
63,000.
Oh, I'm going to bet you that's maybe like 12,000. Well, you know we're going to have to look this up now.
Well, go ahead.
Okay. 63,000.
Well, I mean, all you got to do is Hutchinson,
Kansas. Hutchinson, Kansas has a population of 40,000.
Damn it.
You're closer than I was. Then.
Wait a second. I thought you meant all the surrounding around Hutchinson. I
40,000 people. It's a lot bigger town than I thought it was.
I didn't realize you meant Hutchins proper.
Yes, Andy.
Just the downtown area.
Yeah.
That's where my math was off.
Yes, just a little bit. All right. Thank y'all for listening to us. God bless you. You were closer than me, though. I said 15. You said 60. And 40, it's 20 away from you, 25 from me. So you won that one.
Yeah, but I went over.
So it's 397 to 9 now.
I went over, though.
You're getting double digits probably before June.
Price is right. I went over. It's no good.
All right. Thank y'all for listening to us. God bless y'all. Have a great week.
Please go check out this film in IMAX if it is in your area. It looks amazing. Check it out on YouTube. You can watch the trailer. And go check out all of our great sponsors. Check out Boss Shot Shows, Pacific Calls, Dive Bomb Industries, Alpha Outdoor Specialties, Shin Gear Waders, Dirty Duck, Lucky Duck Coffee, Looking Glass Duck Club Podcast, Gundog Outdoors, Bangtail Whiskey, and Stanfield Hunting Outfitters.